the demonstration of leaving our kids alone. I think it was July the 19th. We're protesting by Parliament Square. Obviously there was an overspill into the road. But obviously they've been working, the police are with the organisers, because the traffic was blocked all day. I think the police decided they wanted us removed, which they tried to by force. I put my arm out, my forearm, to protect myself, to stop being pushed, you know, over. And then that was the end of the matter. And then 4 hours later, when I left in the evening, which the actual incident happened at 3:30 roughly, I left Parliament Square about 9:30. Then 6 policemen run over the road, surrounded me, told me I've committed assault on a police officer. And when I arrived at the police station, I was informed that I punched the police officer twice, clearly in the face, which I did laugh and actually say, I think you've got the wrong guy. And when I saw the film, which I demanded to see, the footage, it clearly showed that all I did was put a forearm up to protect myself and make a barrier between me and the police. There was no
imposing in your personal space.
Yeah, to push me off the road. They decided that that was enough. We want you off the road, you know, and it was forceful. And there were other cases which were more brutal that day, later on in the day. But the point is, I didn't punch any police officer. We all know that is a no-no, and you just wouldn't get away with that. And there's serious consequences, which I've never been arrested in my life before. So, which I did say to the police, and as I said in my interview, the film clearly shows I didn't punch anybody. And obviously on that basis I was released on suspicion, meaning that if they find other angles of footage, they might see that I hit the police officer, which I clearly didn't. So it doesn't matter what angle or what footage you have. So on that basis I was released on suspicion, which I've never heard anything since, because obviously I didn't commit the crime what they accused me of doing.
So how do you think that this accusation has come about? Do you believe they're just mistaking you with a completely different person, or do you think that they've lied in their testimony, in their police statement?
They've definitely lied. I mean, the guy who actually eyeballed me in a staring game and was whispering to 2 of his fellow police officers, I removed myself from that situation. As I quite said to my partner, I think I'm not going to get in a staring game with maybe a 28-year-old man when I'm in my 50s myself. So we removed ourselves when everything was done. So it was clearly an objective, which I did state on my arrest that I recognised him, even though I had no engagement with that actual officer himself. I did say, you know, I know you, which I was asked about later on. And would I sign that? I said that, and I said no. So it was clear, it's as if you show a bit of stern, or they can't push you, they target you, so maybe to deter you to ever come again. And I was asked why I was there, and I was quite happy to say to defend our rights and to save the children, what's going on, and we have rights in this country, and I don't want them to see disappear, so that's why I'm there.
And what do you think of the way that the police have acted? Because obviously this has happened in other cases where the police have lied in their police testimony, and people are getting put through a sort of trial by ordeal, trial by process.
It's an objective to me. There's an objective, and they're carrying out the objective. You know, I mean, it's like any military man or whatever. You are given orders. You know, so whether those orders are being obeyed or policemen are just either losing control or discipline, maybe they're being not trained enough or rushed through, as they seem to be really advertising for recruits at the moment. That's what it looks like to me. It's either coming from the top, or they're not trained enough in discipline and restraint, and they're losing the plot sometimes.
All activity grabbing gravity ring and Voyager station, what kind of materials are you looking to build those with?
Yeah, materials we're looking for versus what we're actually using are different. We'd love some ultralight, expandable material that doesn't exist. So for Gravity Ring and P-Star, the structures are going to be aircraft-grade aluminum. That's basically what they're made out of. And then we'll have solar panels and rocket engines and electronics and other things. But the structures are aluminum for both of those.
Do you have any idea how many launches a Voyager station would take to complete with, let's say, Starship?
Voyager station, yes. I'm not going to reveal that number on this call. I think, and mainly because it's too soon. Since we started working on Pioneer Station, we've found a lot of ways to optimize our launch schedule and our packing in launch vehicles. And so our thoughts on Voyager are shifting. At one point, we were looking at doing that for about 30 launches, plus or minus. I think we're able to get down less, but to be determined. The Gravity Ring project, that's a single launch with P-Star. They'll go up together in one launch vehicle. And then Pioneer Station, we're looking at probably on the order of 6 or 7 launches to have that be completed. But again, that is a floating target. If our plans work out, we might have it done for less.
When are you targeting to be open for commercial visitors?
So commercial visitors, our first paying commercial passengers will be on Pioneer Station, the first Pioneer Station, and our target is to have that operational in 2025. So now the first launches might not be base agency customers, but 2025, 2026, I think the first tourists would be expected on station.
Are you planning on creating an area that would have less gravity or almost like zero gravity?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an easy one. I think everybody wants to have that microgravity experience, maybe not for a long period of time, because you will get sick, but at least to experience it, float around, do those somersaults, spin around. So all of our station designs currently have a central docking hub, and that will be a zero gravity station, a portion of the station. So when you first arrive at station, you're coming from your craft, which was in microgravity. You come to the docking hub, which is microgravity, and then you move out to the gravity portions of the station. And you can always go back. You can spend as much time in that microgravity area as you see fit, and you have that option, which is really exciting.
We have gotten quite a few other space stations, for example, the Blue Origin LED orbital reef, and then there's Axiom Space Station. What do you think about those?
So I think I started this interview by talking about the importance of gravity and the challenges with ISS. And the other stations being proposed right now are pretty much just a duplication of what International Space Station is. Maybe a little bigger, with some bigger windows, some nicer interior finishes, but you're still in a tube that's in microgravity. So I think all of that is important. There definitely is a use case for microgravity stations, especially when you're looking at maybe some pharmaceutical applications. We also feel that there's some strong pharmaceutical applications for artificial gravity as well. But definitely for microgravity, we know that there's some manufacturing and pharmaceutical applications there. So what I see happening is we're going to have a constellation of stations, not only in LEO, but also in cislunar space and even around Mars, or going back and forth from Mars. We're going to have a variety of stations, and Pioneer Station, Voyager Station, those are going to be part of a larger community and a network where you might live on Pioneer Station, you go to the orbital reef to work on whatever experiments and manufacturing you're doing, and you come back and you spend the night on Pioneer, right? We don't often, in the United States at least, sleep where we work. And as we start to build up the infrastructure in LEO, I think all these different stations are going to play their role in that larger community.
I get the feeling from seeing your designs that this is one of those that when you can spit one out, the second becomes much faster.
Absolutely. One of the things we were looking at with International Space Station and why it costs so much to build, right? I mean, when people look at building space stations, they always use ISS as a benchmark for cost, which is fair. It's the only large space station on orbit. But it was built, it was launched with Space Shuttle, which is the most expensive vehicle that we have ever flown to space. I was talking about kind of $10,000 per kilogram. I cut Space Shuttle out of those numbers. Space Shuttle was, significantly more than that. And then also each of those components in ISS, for the most part, was unique, right? Each of the modules was unique, and that just drives up cost. So what our strategy with our station designs, like I said, it's forward feeding. We're trying to create basically a kit of parts that can then feed into the next station, maybe with some minor modifications, but everything is interchangeable and feeds forward. So we're going to go Pioneer Station, and that's going to have some modules on it. Maybe at some point we decide, we want to decommission Pioneer Station. Well, all those station components can then roll over into a Voyager class station, or maybe version 2 of the Voyager class station. There'll have to be some retrofitting, but it's all interchangeable. So the machinery that we're building to build the stations, once we get that machinery up and running, it can run for many years. The modules, the truss components, our star platforms, like you said, everything is designed for maximum longevity and getting those economies of scale, not just doing one-offs.
Will there be connecting corridors between the habitat modules? They've seen some other renders of artificial gravity stations. They don't seem to take into account that people do better when we can interact with one another.
Yes, I agree with all those statements. So there's a trade-off between connectivity and privacy, right? So on Pioneer Station, the station architecture is a little different than Voyager. So I'll just talk about Voyager as kind of like the end goal there. Each of the modules can connect to the one next to it. So you can, let's say, I'm a big company, or I've got a hotel and I want 2 or 3 modules. I can move from one to the other. I can leave the doors open and create a larger space. But then also there's an access tube separate from the modules that allows you to traverse the entire station without ever entering a module. So if a company has some proprietary things that are going on, or a government agency is doing some testing, and they don't want tourists, walking through their module, they can close that off.
So it's like a public walkway, almost.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see this sometimes in towns where they have like a whole bunch of different stores and all their parking lots are connected. That's not the main way to get from store to store. You go out to the street, that's the main way, but you can still get together, connect from one store to the next in the parking lot. That's kind of the analogy, I guess.
Do you have any safety measures for space debris? Do you plan to have powerful enough thrusters to do orbital maneuvers to avoid collisions?
Yeah, space debris is one of those things that, there's the things you know about and there's the things you don't know about. We can track quite a bit of the debris, and then there's just a whole lot we can't track. And, some of the actions by some of the governments around the world are just making the problem worse instead of better, which is really unfortunate. But ISS, has a couple of different strategies to deal with orbital debris. One, like you mentioned, Nico, is active maneuvering. So there's a piece of debris coming in. You can see it coming from a couple orbits away, and that gives you time to get out of the way and to avoid it. The challenging thing are the smaller pieces that aren't trackable that you don't know they're going to hit you until they're hitting you, right? So the way ISS deals with that is a technology called Whipple shielding. It was developed by an engineer whose last name is Whipple. And it's basically a number of layers of material, metal, aluminum and Kevlar, with air gaps in between them. So when a piece of orbital debris impacts that, it fragments, and the energy is dissipated inside of that shield and doesn't puncture the pressure vessel. So we're utilizing those same strategies for our stations, combination of active tracking and maneuvering to get out of the way of debris, and then also Whipple shielding of the sensitive parts of the station, basically anywhere a person is going to be. Another thing we're doing is duplicity. So you're talking about the truss network on Voyager station. Each of those trusses is actually a series, each of those, the spokes, is what you're talking about, the spoke network. Each of those spokes is actually multiple spokes. There's not just one cable there. So if a piece of debris hit a spoke perfectly, we don't have a failure of the entire system. There's redundant spokes to pick up that structural load. So, that kind of goes all the way through all of our station design, duplicity of structural members, of critical life support systems, of, power systems, electrical connections, telecommunications, you just go down the list, right? So those are the three main strategies: avoidance, reducing the damage, and then duplication of systems. Now, ideally, in the future, we're going to have a big multinational effort to clean up all that space debris, and there's a lot of companies working on that and ideas
He's
for
a real
that.
dreamer.
And we're big supporters of all that. And of course, we're talking about operating in low Earth orbit and LEO as we move to cislunar space or Mars orbit.
Mars orbit.
Those debris issues don't take precedence. Now you're dealing with radiation shielding, which you get some radiation shielding in LEO, which you don't as you start to move away from the Earth's magnetosphere. So, and we have some ideas for the radiation shielding as well, and we've got some potential collaborations with some companies that are doing some really interesting things on the radiation shielding front. And actually, our circular torus shapes of stations provide some opportunities that you don't get with an architecture like ISS or Orbital Reef. So there's some really cool things that we're experimenting with on the radiation shielding front, which I can't talk about yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah, and if people want the latest and greatest, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're all over the place.
And we'll be sure to provide links to your socials in our description of this video as well.
So you were talking about low Earth orbit. Do you have any numbers? What would actually be the orbit? Would it be around the 400-kilometer mark where ISS is, or would it be potentially higher?
Yeah, we're looking at slightly higher, probably around 500 kilometers. Also, our orbit's going to be different. Our inclination will be different. So we're looking at a sun-synchronous orbit that would follow the terminator line. So, people ask us all the time, are you able to see the station from Earth? Probably not, because both Pioneer and Voyager we're going to have right on that sun-synchronous orbit terminator line, which means that you would potentially see it right at sunrise or sunset. But given the way light reflects and stuff, and the distance from the observer's standpoint, you might not see it. But the nice thing about that is we won't be getting in the way of any astronomy activities, right? Because we're not going to be visible in the night sky. And then we also have continuous solar power. Our solar panels get power almost 24/7. There's periods of eclipses at certain parts of the year because the Earth doesn't orbit the sun perfectly. There's some wobble and movement there.
Two questions I'd like to ask. Firstly, we have some younger viewers that watch this channel as well. What would you have to say to younger viewers that watch us who may be interested in working in space someday?
That is a question I get a lot, and my answer today is very different than the answer you probably would have gotten 10 or 20 years ago. 10, 20 years ago, if you wanted to work in space, you'd want to go to college, get a degree in engineering, possibly get a master's or a doctorate, and then try to get a job at NASA or JPL, maybe Boeing. But, that's pretty much the path to space. Today, there's companies like ourselves and so many others. You mentioned Rogue Space earlier, Leo Cloud. There's a bunch of private space companies now that are doing really exciting, innovative stuff in space. And so the path to working in space now really is following your passion. If there's something that you really are passionate about and that you like to do, become an expert in it and, find opportunities. There's, you look at SpaceX, they have people who do communication and social media. You've got obviously the engineers and people who are doing the really hard stuff, but you got all those other people as well. For us, in the near term, as I mentioned, we're looking for engineers over this next year, but towards the end of next year and going into 2023, we're going to start looking for our mission control team, who's going to be handling all the on-orbit operations, communication specialists. At some point, in 2023 going into 2024, we're going to need all the customer support staff and people who are handling all our payload management and tourists and all that. So, and then looking forward to the stations. When we have Pioneer Station, we're going to have crew, orbital assembly staff that are on those stations all the time. And so, if you have a degree in medicine or if you have some technical background where you can help to maintain the station or provide first aid, those would be the kind of people we're looking for. And then you get to Voyager Station. Well, now we've got, people working in the restaurants, people working in hotels, people doing station maintenance and operation. There's entertainers. There's just so many different professions. Moving out a decade, if you're in elementary school right now and you're looking at, hey, what do I want to do? In a decade, I think we're going to be at a point where pretty much any profession is going to have a presence in space. If you're an accountant, a bookkeeper, you're, I'm basically naming a profession. There's probably going to be somebody doing that in space.
That's awesome. And my last question, and this is, again, way out there in the future, but it's something I believe that if any station can do right now, it would be orbital assemblies. Have you given much thought to one of your future stations becoming an Earth-Mars cycler?
I did throw that out earlier as an option, yes. We have thought about that. And the real benefit for that, I'm sure, Rich, you've thought of the benefit of this, but that's a long time to be in microgravity traveling from here to Mars. Now, there are some really innovative ideas, like in The Martian, if you recall, they had, their craft had a rotating portion of it. And then also there's another movie coming out, Prometheus, that's being done by Future Dude Entertainment. I think it's coming out next year, the year after that. But they have a craft traveling from one planet to another, and they're accelerating to the halfway point, they flip around, and then they're decelerating. And those acceleration and deceleration operations provide some gravity. And the big downside of that is you're burning a lot of fuel. your propellant requirements to go through the roof, right? So having a station that's rotating, and the rotation, once you get it going, there's no friction in space, so you just keep rotating. Very low energy option to creating artificial gravity for those long duration trips between Earth and Mars. And then you're just taking your Starship or whatever craft, when it comes around the planet, just take the passengers up, they get off. They're living in a hotel until they get off, and they take another trip down. So yeah, we have thought about that. As I mentioned earlier, the radiation issue is one that we're really looking to solve for those interplanetary transits. I'm not sure what SpaceX's solution is for that right now. I think they're thinking people will just survive the trip. But if we have a cycler, theoretically, we've got crew that are doing multiple laps, between Earth and Mars, and being on that platform for an extended period of time. In which case, we would definitely want to make sure that they're safe and they're not being exposed to too much radiation. If I can just add one thing, we're really focused right now, like I said, in that 2023 launch. We're going to be launching P-Star and building Gravity Ring and showing artificial gravity at scale for the first time, and really starting to answer some of those long-standing questions. But we ended there talking about the cycler. Orbital Assembly Corporation, really our mission and our goal is to get large numbers of people living, working, and thriving in space. And so Voyager Station, while that's a flagship project, that's not the end goal. That's a stepping stone to bigger, larger things, moon bases, settlements on Mars, stations throughout the solar system, creating large economies and communities in space. And that's what we're passionate about. Baby steps right now, but there's some great stuff ahead, not just with our company, but just space in general.
Thank you, Tim, for being with us today on this episode. It's been real great having you here, and it's been fascinating listening to what you've had to say, and definitely a lot of things to look forward to from you in the future. As I said before, we will be linking all of Orbital Assemblies Corporation's socials in the description of the video below, and with Tim's permission too, the NetCapital link, if that's okay?
Absolutely, yes.
It's been absolutely awesome talking to you. The whole Orbital Assembly Corporation is very interesting. The projects are awesome, and we'd be happy to talk to you again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.